Hello and welcome to you from wherever you're joining us in the world, and thank you for doing so. My name is Tony Barry and I'm the president of FIDIC. FIDIC is the global representative body for national associations of consulting engineers and represents 1 million engineering professionals worldwide and about 40,000 firms in more than 100 countries. The buildings and infrastructure sector in which FIDIC members work contributes about $36 trillion to global GDP. So we're part of a very significant sector of the global economy. FIDIC is really pleased to be taking part in this webinar today with EFCA on such an important subject for our industry. Our ongoing webinar program is addressing many key issues of vital importance to the industry, and this latest event, organised by FIDIC's IFI committee in partnership with EFCA, I'm sure will continue that successful series of events. It's important that we bring key stakeholders together to discuss key challenges that we face as an industry and indeed as a world. And I'm very pleased to be working in a sector where such discussions can take place in a spirit of collaboration and partnership, and we're all working together to develop solutions that can make a real difference. The COVID-19 crisis has triggered a reshuffling of investment priorities for governments globally and has added further pressure on already constrained fiscal space in many developed and developing countries. These problems have obviously been complicated by further crisis in the energy sector in Europe and conflicts throughout the world. Ensuring quality in infrastructure investment has become more critical than ever before for the efficient and effective use of the limited resources we have for a resilient and sustainable future. So we're delighted to be part of this webinar with EFCA today. We also have the privilege of having the Global Infrastructure Hub CEO, Marie Lamprando, as a keynote speaker today, and together with a distinguished panel of Global Infrastructure Hub and Multilateral Development Bank representatives to discuss the importance of preparing quality infrastructure projects with a broader sustainability perspective. In that vein, you may be aware that FIDIC's published a climate change charter and its commitment to reaching the SDGs, and it's actively contributing to the multi-stakeholder dialogue on how to deliver sustainable infrastructure. There is a need for closer collaboration between financial institutions, governments, and firms to tackle this global challenge, and I'm looking forward to today's webinar assisting in that aim. I'd like to now hand over to my European counterpart, President of EFCA, Benoit Clocheret, to make some introductory remarks. Thank you, Benoit. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tony. Hello to all of you, wherever you are in Europe and around the globe. My name is Benoit Clocheret. I'm the EFCA president. EFCA is the European Federation of Engineering Consultancies, celebrating its 30th anniversary in 2022, so this year. And we are representing more than 10,000 companies in Europe in 28 European countries. We are here to advocate for the industry, but also to help the construction sector and all stakeholders involved in developing infrastructure to look ahead and pave the path for the future. And I am pleased to also announce that we are releasing today as EFCA our 2022 Future Trends Report that you can access on the EFCA website. I am extremely delighted to participate today in this dialogue with the MDBs and all of you, and share the European concern in delivering quality infrastructure and attracting private investment, which is absolutely key for our common future. The European Union, as you all know, has set very ambitious targets to itself as a continent to become carbon neutral in 2050, and with intermediary targets in 2030, by having the objective to reduce by 55% its carbon emissions. But EU has not only ambitions for itself, but also wishes to be at the forefront of the climate battle around the globe. And in this regard, is deploying an ambitious investment instrument called Global Gateway. The Global Gateway is its new connectivity strategy to create smart, sustainable, and secure links with countries around the world, especially in the energy, transport, health, and education sectors. This Global Gateway is aimed at mobilizing 300 billion euros globally and in a way that is fully aligned with the quality infrastructure principles of the GIH. The development banks that many of you represent today are aware of the importance of preparing such quality projects, and not only to prepare them, but to promote and attract private funding to this effect. And consulting engineers hired to bring the knowledge and expertise that helps clients live up to their sustainability commitments. And I'm also delighted, like Tony, that we are here all together to dialogue on this very important topic, and especially highlighting the preparation stages, because more than ever, these preparation phases of infrastructure projects are absolutely critical. They are absolutely vital. And it's even more true today that we are in a world that is quickly changing, with huge constraints on the fiscal space, as we all know, with major resilience issues that we are all facing, and in the context of also limited resources that forces us to promote recycling and life cycle cost approaches. These preparation phases require a specific attention, and that's why it's so important that we take this time this morning or this afternoon to focus on this, because they require specific financial resources and also procurement processes that are aligned with selecting the best players to help the development banks, the public authorities, to develop high quality, reliable and sustainable infrastructure. So I will stop here my few words of introduction. And before leaving the floor to Ines, I would like to thank Tony Barry and the entire FIDIC staff, as well as the EFCA staff, to make this event possible, and all the speakers for the contribution to this dialogue today that is so important for our industry at the European and global levels. So now it's my time to hand over to Ines Ferguson. Ines is the Director of International Business Development at TIPSA, and she's been involved with FCAS for many, many years as the chair of the European External Action Committee. And since June 2022, she is President-elect of FCA. Thank you very much. Enjoy the webinar. And now the floor is yours, Ines.
Thank you very much, Benoit. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you today. FIDIC and EFCA wanted to invite the Global Infrastructure Hub to our regular dialogue with Multilateral Development Banks to learn more about a global initiative that is actually driving a vision and having high quality discussions on infrastructure investment. We wanted to know more about how multilateral development banks are working with governments in lower middle income countries to develop quality infrastructure projects and pipelines. We've seen that the financial sector has made great progress in defining what is a quality infrastructure investment. But in this webinar, we want to focus on how we can ensure an effective delivery of quality infrastructure. And in particular, we want to understand how the quality infrastructure principles are being integrated into investments by governments and development banks, what additional skills and knowledge needs to be incorporated in the preparation of projects, and if this has a direct impact in the cost of project preparation, and what specific contracting vehicles, programs, or technical assistance funds are being made available by the multilateral development banks to support project preparation. So with this introduction, we have an initial poll question for the audience. The question is, would rising the sustainability criteria in early stages of infrastructure projects result in the delivery of quality infrastructure? So we will give you 20 seconds and we will see the results. Okay, so the result is overwhelmingly yes. This is a good start. A perfect introduction to our speakers today. We have a very distinguished roundtable of speakers that have made time to join this webinar. I know they have very tight agendas, so I truly appreciate that they have made time for this conversation. We have with us today Henry Blas, who is the Chief Content Officer at the Global Infrastructure Hub. He's a civil engineer and economist with an impressive track record in global consulting engineering firms and investors. And prior to joining GIH, he was director for the Global Resilient Cities Network. We have also Marcos Martinez. He's associate director at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. He's a civil engineer with over 20 years of experience in infrastructure finance, and he's currently the head of the PPP advisory team at the bank. Sergio Martinez is a senior loan officer at the European Investment Bank. He's an industrial engineer with extensive experience as a consultant in the energy sector and was recently appointed senior loan officer to coordinate operations with global partners. Nita Pokrel is the chief of the water sector group at the Asian Development Bank. She's an environmental engineer with extensive experience in the water and sanitation sector in Asia, and she's been working with the bank for the past 19 years. We also had in the panel Mike Salawu, Director for Infrastructure and Urban Development at the African Development Bank, but unfortunately he has not been able to join the panel in time. So we will have a little bit more time for additional questions. Before we start with the roundtable, I want to introduce our keynote speaker, Marie Lamprando. She's the CEO of the Global Infrastructure Hub, and she was not able to attend in person, but she has kindly recorded a keynote speech presenting the hub and addressing some of the consulting engineering industry's questions on quality infrastructure. Marie is a civil engineer with training in marketing, strategy, management, and leadership, and she's the CEO of the GIH since January 2019. She has worked as high-level advisor on infrastructure strategy and finance, and she has led infrastructure initiatives departments at the World Economic Forum. Throughout her career, she has held relevant positions in utility companies and in consulting engineering firms working internationally. So if we can have her video, please. The sound. I believe the sound is not on. I'm not able to hear Marie. Okay, maybe what we can do is, until the technical problem is solved, I will actually highlight 3 key messages of her speech that I think we should really take into account for this discussion. So as you will hear in a few minutes, hopefully, Marie insisted in the need to introduce ESG criteria as early as possible in projects and also in the strategic planning, to ensure that sustainability measures are followed through all through the project. She also mentions that preparing quality infrastructure projects might mean investing a little bit more at the early stages, but it gives the opportunity to significantly reduce the actual cost of the project, thanks to a life cycle approach. And the third takeaway from her speech is the need to increase standards and labels to drive infrastructure investment, to improve decision-making, and also to avoid greenwashing. So these were very important messages that Marie mentioned in her speech and that I wanted to highlight. I don't know if we would have the chance to listen to her speech now. Otherwise, I will go to the roundtable and start with the questions. Okay, so it seems that we have trouble listening to Marie. So maybe we can leave her video for the end while we sort out this small technical problem. I will start issuing questions to our roundtable today on, first of all, on the importance of project preparation and its alignment with quality infrastructure principles. So let's start with you, Marcos. The first question to you would be that the Ebrd was one of the first banks to effectively introduce sustainable infrastructure within its operational structure. Can you tell us which of the quality infrastructure principles are being prioritized by Ebrd, and how are they being incorporated into the project preparation? The floor is yours, Marcos.
Thank you. Thank you, Ines. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here with you and share what Ebrd is doing in this respect. Well, I think I don't think it's fair to say that we prioritize some principles over the others. The bank, since it was established 30 years ago, it had promoted environmental and sustainable principles. In doing so, I will say that probably there are more mechanisms or procedures over this time where the bank has been focusing more on environmental and social and life cycle. But that doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to the other principles regarding governance and natural resilience and sustainability growth. The bank has a department called Environmental and Sustainability Department, and they are responsible for assessing and managing all the environmental and social risk of projects, and every single project, not only infrastructure, not only project preparation, but any lending or any financial activity and financial product that the bank delivers to our clients. Obviously, they follow a policy that is reviewed every 5 years. Last time it was reviewed reviewed in 2019, and is about to be reviewed in 2024. And it's very similar to other MDBs. Okay, this is obviously aligned with the intention of MDBs to apply similar principles in quality infrastructure and sustainability. In terms of project preparation and infrastructure, which probably is where I'm more responsible. I mean, well, we are responsible, the team I work for. This policy has very strict requirements. We call it performance requirements. Some of them are related to labor, some of them are related to resource efficiency, and we do apply all of them when we prepare these projects. Okay, my team within the PVP advisory unit, we do that when we prepare feasibility study, when we prepare the technical specifications of the projects that are going to be tender. But again, this team is responsible for auditing that, okay, and to be sure that these principles are achieved in every single project. And in order to give an example, for example, we were working in a road in Belarus that required to change a whole junction because we identified there were some health and safety issues in the design of the road. And that's the level of involvement of the bank, right? This team looks at the project that are going to be implemented, looks at the design, and tries to improve it, again, based on these performance requirements I was mentioned before. Others that are also very critical are biodiversity, land acquisition. Land acquisition is and restriction in land use is always a potential issue when we work in projects, especially in low and middle income countries. Some of our countries, for example, do not have still private ownership of land. So when we work in financing roads, when we work in financing railways, we do need to pay a lot of attention in how the livelihood of people are restored after the infrastructure is constructed, how these communities are properly compensated. Finally, and I don't really want to go too long, another principle that we apply, and I think is critical in terms of quality infrastructure, is the view of life cycle. I mean, working in PPPs is critical that the government understands that when the infrastructure, when you look at the infrastructure, and not only the construction cost, but also all the additional budget, all the fiscal constraint that the new infrastructure is going to bring to the government, in order for the asset to be properly maintained, to be properly operated, it's critical that you have that vision from the inception. Only at the planning stage, we look at not only the sovereign loan to finance the road, to finance the hospital. We also look at the government having the resources, having the capacity and the quality expertise in order to have the resources for the asset really to be there in the long term and to be resilient and to operate and to be operated properly. Obviously, we are a bank. That means we are not a technical entity. We are not a planning entity. We are mostly formed by bankers, and only few of us are engineers. And that means that effectively we do need a lot of advisory. We need a lot of consultancy and engineer support, and it's critical for us that your community is up to speed in all these issues, in the way we deal with environmental and social, in the way we deal with the assessment of life cycle costs and an assessment of the long-term implication of infrastructure. I'll leave it here. I think I answered your question, but happy to expand if needed.
Thank you very much for that, Sergio. I really take note of your message for consulting engineers to get up to speed with these requirements, and particularly with the life cycle costing, which involves having a very holistic and a broad view of the projects from the very early stages, such as the planning or the design. So thank you very much for that, Sergio. Okay, now I'm going to switch over to Nita. Nita, hello, thank you for joining. My first question to you would be talking about sustainability and resilient water infrastructure in Asia and the Pacific, where it's particularly critical. How is the Asian Development Bank responding to climate challenges and the demographic pressure in the region in terms of infrastructure investment? And does this involve any additional requirements to your project preparation? Nita?
Thank you, Ines, and thank you for having me here to begin with, to both FIDIC and IFCA colleagues. The region, Asia and Pacific, we always say that the battle to climate change is won or lost here. You probably have heard ADB say this quite a lot since last year. We have really made renewed ambitions on raising our climate financing to 100 billion of our own resources, from our own resources until 2030, and of course, use that to leverage a lot more climate financing and actions in the region. Water is the way to adapt, as we've just seen, and the latest IPCC report confirms that 60% of adaptation interventions must come from water. Glaring example, sadly, we saw what happened in Pakistan. The events are not, I'm also an engineer, it's off the charts. We can't even plan, we can't even make, 1 in 1,000 event or 1 in 10,000 events anymore. It is completely off the chart. So how do we prepare? And as much as we would like to say, look, preparation is not going to change much, it's not true. We really have to completely reshift our preparation, completely relook at how do we quantify risks, how do we go upstream, actually beyond what we have been doing in terms of preparing, having what our clients propose. So we have, again, totally reshifted how we we've come out with a guidance note that just came out a month ago in August as part of our Asia Water Forum on mainstreaming climate resilience in water sector. And when we talk about resilience, we actually not just talk about climate change, but COVID. Just look at COVID-19, which our region is still reeling with. It's not over yet. And we surveyed many of our clients, water utilities, irrigation management entities, river basin management entities that we work with, over 50 of them, on how it impacted them in terms of carrying their business, project preparation, sustainability of what they were doing, what changed. And a lot has changed. So how do we then incorporate what we've learned, that a lot, into our project preparation, into making, I think, some of you referred already, our criteria upstream. What do we put on paper as these are the aspects that we have to put on the table as sustainability criteria, as inclusion criteria, as resilience criteria. And they do add, perhaps, again, different set of people. They add upskilling of people. I did my engineering in early 90s. Climate was a bird in those days, no? It was there. We did good engineering design, but the awareness of what resilient design might mean, the concepts of allowing room for the river wasn't just there. So we all have to reskill. We all have to, again, go upstream, sit with our clients. We work with 46 developing member countries in our region. What entry points do they see? What challenges do they see? Where do we resource them? I mean, just pointing challenges is not going to happen. Where do we find those gaps and plug in with resources? And our group, we do a lot in trying to bring additional grant financing, bring additional capacity building to plug those gaps. And again, some of the things I think my colleague from Ebrd already mentioned, we've also started looking at doing more of strategic procurement planning. We put out a new guidelines on how do we do that. And that is not just for procurement. It looks at enabling environment, looks at capacity. It looks at capacity to do resilient projects, looks at capacity to do quality infrastructure, which of course means inclusive and sustainable. So these and also looking at during the course, I mean, we used to have what we call design and monitoring frameworks. We still do. And again, with this unpredictable nature, we might have to look at allowing more adjustments, allowing more unpredictability built into our project designs. And engineers aren't good at unpredictabilities, are we? And I count myself as one of them. So how do we have contracts that allow unpredictability? Is there room for such without running us into lots and lots of arbitration negotiation costs? So there's a whole host of project preparation that needs to be done differently, whole host of contracting documentation that needs to be done differently, whole host of capacity checking, stakeholder engagement that needs to be done differently. And we are actively doing that. So I think I've gone longer than I was allowed, but happy to elaborate and continue later on. Thank you, Ines.
Thank you, Nita. That was fantastic exposure of things. I think it's very enlightening for us to know how you are thinking about completely reshifting project preparation and quantifying the risks, and how that means upscaling our skills and maybe bringing additional skills and knowledge to our teams. So this is a very important takeaway, and I thank you for this reply. So now I'm going to shift over to Sergio. So Sergio, we know that the European Investment Bank is the climate bank of the EU, and it has a new climate strategy that is having an important impact in the type of infrastructure projects that are being financed. So could you explain how the strategy is having an impact in infrastructure investments and also in your standards for project preparation?
Thank you, Ines. That's a very interesting question. I will start giving some ideas about what the EIB Climate Bank Roadmap means in terms of actual funding. The EIB decided to align all its activities with the spirit of the Paris Agreement. That means that starting in 2021, everything we do will contribute to tackle the climate change, or at least will be neutral. The EIB has made this commitment. It's the first international institution that has decided that will not finance any activity that will harm the environment and the climate. I think it's one of the key statements that the EIB has made, and we expect that many other financial institutions will eventually follow. The idea is that we will be able to unlock 1 trillion euros investments by the end of the decade. So by providing different financial instruments and support to project preparation and origination, we want to be able to unlock investment for this amount in, as I said before, sectors fully aligned with the Paris Agreement. It's a statement, and we feel we are on track to manage that. How we do that? We have different tools. One of the most important tools we have developed is to embed the climate risk assessment in everything we do. The EIB has a team of about 400 engineers and technical economists that in-house contribute to assessing the quality and supporting the EIB operations and technical assistance we provide to our counterparties. This climate risk assessment is now an intrinsic part of the rural process. Because the climate change has arrived, we see the flooding that we saw in Pakistan these days, we see the drought that we suffer in Europe. It's not something that will happen. It's something that is already here. What we are finding out is that the past is no longer representing the future. So there are new risks, new vulnerabilities that in the past were not assessed. And the infrastructure project, because they are designed for very long operational periods, to operate for very long period, will be the key assets that will suffer. Things like hydropower plants, airports, roads, railways that are designed to last 20, 40, 50, 100 years. They need to have a climate risk assessment embedded into the preparation phase. The EIB is supporting promoters, public entities, governments, stakeholders in trying to assess this risk before, at the very beginning. So when you design your project, you are taking into account these potential vulnerabilities since the very first moment. But also, in order to further support this approach, we have developed a Paris alignment strategy. We want to proactively support our clients, our partners, our counterparties to apply the same standards. And we have unlocked several funds and TA facilities, technical assistance, so we can help these committed partners to implement also this alignment with the spirit of the Paris Agreement. Because we are an European institution, the basis of what we do is the European taxonomy for sustainable activities. But because we also have this technical expertise in-house, we have been able to basically land or to apply even more stringent criteria that we are very happy to share with the sector. The other part of your question was on the environmental and social standards. Definitely, because what we see is that there are more vulnerabilities that are affecting to the people and environment. The climate change is creating more vulnerable environment, more vulnerable communities. So in order to apply the environmental and social standards, we need to have a specific sensitivity to protect, as I said, the people and the environment for the climate challenges. And that is what the EIB is doing. For instance, in the field of the hydropower, we have developed a specific guidance on hydropower plants, where we take into account the specific vulnerabilities that we are starting to see as a consequence of the climate change in both the people and the environment, because we believe that these two elements cannot be separated. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for that as well. It was so interesting to hear you talk about how climate risk assessments need to be incorporated in the preparation phase, and also how the environmental and social standards are looking at the vulnerability scenarios that are being created by climate change in infrastructure. So thank you very, very much for that as well. So now I'm moving over to Henry. Henry, can you develop a little bit more on how the Global Infrastructure Hub is helping translate the quality infrastructure principles into infrastructure investment criteria? And if this is really attracting private sector investment, if you could give us a few examples in lower income countries, that would be great.
Thank you. And since we didn't get the intro, maybe I'll just give a very quick intro as to what the Global Infrastructure Hub is. So we were created by the G20 in order to support finance ministers and central bank governors in issues related to infrastructure finance. And so we were supporting the group for the infrastructure working group, and we also partner on the sustainable finance working group, working sort of sustainable finance more generally. So the QI principles, they were developed and endorsed by the G20 leaders during the Japanese presidency back in 2019. And we, and along with other partners, have been obviously supportive of the content of the QI principles. We can find on our website a lot of examples that we actually develop and proposed by the countries that exemplify what quality infrastructure means for G20 members. So now back to your question about what is it that we do to support the implementation of those principles. So first, I will start with what the G20 is working on, because we're supporting that group and really love the impact that we're creating through the work of that group. So obviously, beyond the principles themselves, the group is really sort of trying to sort of see how we could make those principles more practical. And so this year, under the Indonesian presidency of the G20 and led by the IFC, with support from other partners, a compendium of indicators was actually developed, and again, partnership with countries, MDBs, etc. And so what the group did was gathering the most common indicators that were currently used for projects alongside the different principles. So you can actually find that compendium online. There are some cross-cutting QI indicators that are sector agnostic, and they can be applied across different subsectors. And then we have also, the IFC sort of put together a sort of menu-based approach for the rest of the compendium, and that sort of go through all the different sort of sector specific. So the idea here really was not to sort of reinvent the wheel. Obviously you've heard from the other speakers that the MDBs in particular have been very active in sort of developing standards, process, and indicators, and the idea was not to necessarily sort of reinvent that. The idea was really trying to sort of found that at the G20 level, a consensus around sort of common indicators. So those principles are now being used actually by organizations. Besides the MDBs and the investors, one of those initiatives is Fast Infra, which was led by private sector, but also the Global Infrastructure Facility as part of the World Bank. So at the moment, the implementation of those principles, as you can see through indicators and standards, is still relatively new. The idea is really through that work and through those indicators, is to make infrastructure, a sustainable quality infrastructure, a more liquid asset, so that it's easier for investors to know that they're investing in quality infrastructure assets, and sort of releasing more capital into the market. So because it's relatively new, it's actually kind of hard to answer probably your second question as to how it is effectively attracting private investors. Again, the idea, the main reason why the G20 started working on QI is to accelerate private investment in infrastructure. So that's really the objective. But it's hard to extract trends at the moment and to be able to demonstrate that we'll actually go there, because it's still relatively new. What we can see, if we take a parallel, is that if you look at sort of the trend within sort of private investors, clearly ESG take-up rates has sort of increased dramatically over the past sort of 3-4 years on environment, but also social and governance aspect. And we've seen obviously all the investors sort of pouring into renewables, which, you know, but whether it's right or not, is still seen as something that sort of address the quality infrastructure objective. So if you're interested in some of those trends, and I realize many in the audience are also following finance flows globally, we've actually sort of put together in partnership with many other data providers a flagship reports called the Infrastructure Monitor. And as it happens, by chance, is actually being released, the 2022 version, just today. So feel free to look at it. The section on ESG is will actually come in about a month, but you can look at some of the existing trends in the past version, the 2021 report. So hopefully that's useful to the audience. So is it when it comes to us, we're supporting the G20, we're supporting Fast Infra, and we try to address the information gap and data gap through reports like the Monitor. So now if we look into sort of more specifically some of the other work that we're doing and other partners are doing, I think many of sort of previous panelists sort of mentioned and highlighted that really sort of capacity building in order to prepare this project is actually critical. And I think everyone across the board has to basically sort of, go through some upskilling, because some of those new resilience in particular aspects are, we still, try to get our head around them. And so there needs to be an upskilling in there. In emerging markets, as you can imagine, it's even sort of more complicated. So one thing that we're doing is sort of developing capacity building programs in partnership with the private sector. One of those examples is the AIFP. It's the Africa Infrastructure Fellowship Program that we've developed in partnership with Meridian and a university in France. And we sort of it's a sort of 7 week, I think 7 weeks capacity building programs, and we train African civil servants in project finance, delivery, supporting them to improve economies, environments, and communities through infrastructure. And I think what we've seen is that over the years we've actually sort of beefed up the whole section on quality infrastructure, ESG, because nowadays that's actually critical if you want to attract the type of private sector investors that they're trying to attract. So yeah, that's, there's definitely something where I think we're going to see, we need actually a lot more support and sort of a lot of capacity building support across the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Henry. So I take note of the indicators that have been prepared by the Global Infrastructure Hub. Hopefully we can make that link available in the chat. And how the Global Infrastructure Hub is also filling up the data gap on quality infrastructure around the world. Data seems to be very important to make sustainability credible and projects comparable. And also how you are tackling the capacity building around quality infrastructure, which is also one of your main objectives. So thank you very much for that contribution. We will now switch to the second topic, which is around cost, which is something that is of great concern to our industry. So we want to know of how cost is actually, so the project preparation is becoming more costly for governments and for the banks. So let's start with you, Nita. The Asian Development Bank is a major infrastructure investor in the region. And do you think that the banks need to invest more in preparing quality infrastructure projects? And what's the type of expertise that you would be expecting from consultants that assist you in this important task?
Thank you, Ines. Yes, I also see a lot of focus and questions on this capacity and how fast we can build it. Yes, MDB, I think the first question we've already answered. We do need to do things differently, and MDBs have realized and are all working on it. It will be amazing for anybody to say we're not doing that. And it does have cost. We are all adding more cost to project preparation. We are creating different tools and facilities like project preparation facilities to support, mobilizing additional grants to support. Traditionally, again, this idea of consultants doing X part of it and other consultants coming in and verifying and then doing detailed design, all that is very time consuming, and we have had that luxury to do it. And again, as we have all seen, the situations, the safety factor, what I think Sergio articulated it really well from IADB. What we are used to as engineers and designers, that factor past, based on past events, is how we have done everywhere. That's gone. It really has to be risk-based. What happened in past will, again, looking at Pakistan, will not change. So are we able to now quickly shift to that? If you ask for our region in Asia and the Pacific, no disrespect, our consultants in general, our average age is 60, I would say even 70, and they're all old men. No disrespect, there's no intergenerational dialogue. We need to unshackle that. We need to really have more youth. We're talking about digitalization as an entry point of really transforming how we design. But to have digitalization as an entry point, a usable tool, we need the youth there who are savvy with digitalization and use of technology and tool, not people, even I consider myself, I learned with 30 years ago looking at 100-year-old books. We need to undo all that, throw all that out. And are we ready to do that? We need polyglots. We can't have one engineer expertise, one consultant specializing in this and somebody else doing it. We need the same person to be climate experts, digitalization expert, instrumentation expert, within the other realms of learning. So we need to go back and talk to the universities. Are universities ready to quickly produce, revamp their courses to produce in the new challenging context of what it takes? So it's a much larger picture where I think all of us, and some great points were made about private sector, and we are all realizing private sector has a role, universities have roles, each of us have roles to play, and I think we are gearing up for that. But it is a very tall challenge, but it's good to understand the problem is big, and we'll all get around to it eventually, I would say, on a positive note.
Thank you, Nita, for that positive note. I think we need it after the description of the situation. So indeed, including and introducing climate and digital and different instruments into the project preparation does require bringing new types of expertise and probably younger expertise to the teams. So this is a very important point that we take on, in addition to the one of training, which is also, I think, a very, very legitimate debate, and also a far-reached one. So I think those points were very, very interesting. Thank you for that. Okay, so now, Sergio, back to you. Would you consider that aligning infrastructure projects in EIB requires additional funding for the preparations? And what type of programs or framework contracts or TA facilities does the bank have to boost this project preparation?
Thank you, Ines. Well, I think it was said by the other participants, so we fully agree. So we need to spend more in project preparation, for sure, yes. But I would say that this is not just a waste of money, but an investment to deliver safer projects, more sound projects that render the results we expect. So in the EIB, we are fully committed to this. I always insist, promoters, that they need to understand and to mitigate the risk associated to the project's infra and any other type of operation. They understand, but not always they do it. When you are able to understand what are the risks associated to your business, to your asset, it's easier to keep them under control, to mitigate, to remove this risk. In this sense, to be part of FIDIC as an association of engineers give you some sort of peace of mind, of comfort. When we work with projects and we see that the contracts are based in FIDIC, that the engineers, they have this expertise, they are part of this knowledge sharing platform, we have some, I would say, peace of mind. We think that things as a starting point are good. Of course, we need to assess, we need to understand what is behind. but we feel that investing in a very sound and good preparation is key. You need to understand your risk, you need to assess, and for that you need strong and sound professionals, that's for sure. It's not expensive in the medium to long term. It actually can be the key for rendering bankable projects, and that should be the key message. You mentioned also what type of program and frameworks we have. Basically, the EIB, as an European institution, is following the European strategies in the different regions. NDC, this development strategy of the EU. Under NDC, and what was mentioned before, Global Gateway, we have a number of financial instruments, technical assistance facilities, and support to public and private promoters. We have several initiatives. So in principle, we try to focus on public because in most of the regions, the infrastructure is still managed by public entities. They are perhaps the ones that have less access to sound engineering, to sound commercial skills. In the past, infrastructure was something undertaken by public entities with the only objective to get them work. Basically, the cost-effective solution was not always the goal, but now we say that we need to take into account the cost-benefit analysis. It's not just having this bridge, this road, this airport, but we need to design the one that suits the needs of the people, the strategy that conduces to the less cost for the consumers. So in this sense, we have a number of TA facilities available for the countries. With the private sector, we don't have so many facilities, but still all these upstream facilities or upstream works that you need to do for the preparation, they are eligible for the EIB. And what I would propose to the audience is that whether you have any opportunity, any chance, any question, talk to us and we can think about potential ways to support. Because the Commission, the EU Commission, the European Union has decided to invest 79 billion euros in infrastructure in cooperation in the next decade. And we need to support that with adequate project preparation and financial instruments. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that feedback. Indeed, helping clients look at the cost-benefit analysis, and particularly in the public sector, and help them analyze which is the best option, I think is really the direction we should be taking, looking into the future. And it's great that the bank is given support in that way. Okay, so I will give the floor now to Henry to explain a little bit in your experience working with governments. Are they expressing any concern on the increased cost of preparing quality infrastructure projects? So do they need to allocate more resources to project preparation, and is this difficult for them?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think there's a couple of questions in the chat about how those principles were first put together. So I think they sort of were put together as a consensus among the G20 economies, which obviously represents 90-95% of the economy in the world. So I think it's fair to say it's a relative consensus as to where those principles come from. Now, while there's a consensus on the principles themselves, it is very much true that the costs is a concern among members, not only the cost of the preparation of the project, but also the implementation of it, especially in emerging economies, when you have to sort of start, integrating so many new ideas and many challenges that didn't exist in the past. So obviously, also every country has specific circumstances, risk, priorities. So that makes it difficult to have a one-size-fits-all approach to indicators and standards. So I think there will remain some flexibility in order to sort of not burden, especially emerging economies with principles and targets that they might not be able to achieve right away. But still, it is an interesting framework because overall sort of drives quality up across the board and actually taking the whole industry with it. So at the moment, as I said, the current version of the QI is a compendium of indicators. And it's always a menu type of approach. And that may sound like a little step, but it's important to recognize that it is a consensus step. And in today's world, sort of finding consensus across all the G20 countries is not an easy achievement. So I think we have to recognize this is moving into the right direction. And again, some other players, in particular the MDBs, are probably went well ahead of that as well, and sort of driving change on the ground. So in terms of testing it to make sure that it's actually delivering sort of high quality, but also sort of not burdening countries or governments with the additional cost, the IFC is actually in partnership with G20 is actually currently piloting actual projects implementing those sort of QI principles and indicators, and the idea is to use those cases to sort of learn more from a cost perspective. The idea at the moment is really to sort of reuse existing studies as much as possible and to limit the potential additional cost. So that's kind of, I guess, a summary of the sort of G20 process and what's happening there. So I think in general, if you look at the industry more generally and sort of governments and private sector together, I think the consensus is that, and I think many of the other panelists have sort of confirmed that, is that yes, it will bring some additional costs when it comes to the project preparation, but that will be counterbalanced by better planning, better efficiency, and better decision longer term savings. The challenge here really is that because it's still relatively new, and we have in general lack of data when it comes to infrastructure investments and infrastructure assets, it's actually quite difficult to sort of prove it using actual numbers. There's obviously a lot of subsectors, a lot of specificities as well for projects, but that data gap is really something that we and other partners are trying to achieve in order to provide engineers and others with the type of evidence that will enable them to actually take a better decision and integrate some of the solutions, whether technological or whether it is sort of planning or nature-based, in order to achieve the same outcome. To actually achieve better outcomes and longer term sort of savings. So that's really, again, the data gap here is sort of making it quite difficult. There are the few organizations are trying to address that, and some very interesting development. One of them is it's called CCRI. It's actually developed in partnership with private sectors, both engineers and investors as well, and really sort of trying to look at physical climate risk assessments and integrate that in the way investors are looking at business case and trying to integrate those sort of future scenarios, but also the impact of those resilient strategies into the business case, and that will really enable sort of better quality project to be put together, but also recognizing the longer term benefits that we all believe those projects will bring. So that's on the sort of cost side. What we're seeing as well, I think I touched on that in the previous and for the previous question, is really that beyond the longer term benefits, I think the market has sort of really moved, and I think that's something that has really convinced quite a few emerging economies in particular to actually really look at quality infrastructure and ESG more, in more details. Investors, especially in sort of Western markets, are really sort of focusing heavily now on quality, ESG, transition risk, etc. And that's not just a nice to have; it's really kind of like an actual requirement. We are hearing, if I compare some of the deals that I used to do, 10, 15 years ago, I'm looking in the same firm now, and they are currently refusing deals based on those aspects, even though the financial looked actually quite good. So the market has really moved. And we're still trying to learn, but is really open to recognize the sort of longer term benefits if they're sort of well presented, because that's something that's part of their business. Their business strategy. If you're interested in sort of looking at some of those new projects, we actually, in partnership with IFC, we organize a webinar series looking at projects. So we had the public and private sector people that actually did that deal, and we sort of with them we went through what worked, what could have done, what was required, and actually it's kind of interesting that for some of those deals, quite a few actually, even though the instrument that was used was not a green bond, was not a sustainable linked instrument, actually, when they had to sort of get investors to join in, 90% of the questions were actually around ESG and quality. The financial were kind of important, obviously, but that was kind of the focus was really like, are we investing in the right type of assets? So the market has moved, and I think that that means that, especially if you plan to, or if your clients are sort of planning to partner with the private sectors, those things are not, again, not just a nice to have, they actually a requirement to get investors. Yeah, thank you.
Great, Henry. So also very important messages you expressed right now on the indeed acknowledging that it couldn't be more costly to prepare quality infrastructure projects from the early stages, but how that is actually cost effective in the long term, and how we need to support this with sustainability data that also have to be made available from the very early stages of the project, and how it is important to fill in this data gap. And I think consulting engineers can be very instrumental in collecting and developing the sustainability data around the projects, and actually to monitor these sustainability criteria and help the clients make sure that the infrastructure is delivered according to the data. And then also how this is not just a nice to have, but that the market is moving, and that we need, if we want to attract private investment, ESG criteria is actually becoming a must for projects to have. So I think these are very important messages to take note of, and I really appreciate your input. Okay, so to a final question on cost, Marcos, in Ebrd, what additional areas of expertise is the bank looking for in the project preparation? And how is the bank setting up programs or facilities that can help it in this task?
Thank you, Ines. Okay, very briefly. So the bank is helping clients with in similar ways as my colleagues in EIB or ADB. Effectively, we ensure quality with higher standards, better agreements, reference to the right codes and regulations when we work in projects, and that requires advisory. Okay, and I think there's consensus in the higher cost of quality projects, like everything in life, right? Everything that when we make a purchase decision, we realize that if you want to buy a product that is a little bit better, with better quality, it is more expensive, and you expect the product to be more expensive. And that's the same for the countries where we operate. So the bank makes this policy engagement with governments, trying to demonstrate there is value for money when they pursue these more expensive projects, because the projects are better, are going to last longer, and going to be more resilient to risks in the future. And the bank can provide them with the support to reduce this price gap, right? During the preparation, we focus on standardization of contracts and documentation. Is critical that the government and the private sector and speak the same language. They use the same agreements. They use the right codes and again reference. So we provide the capacity to the public sector clients to understand that. We also focus on accreditation. I mean, that's probably a little bit related to what I'm working on, which is PPP project preparation. We have a specific program together with our MDBs where we provide the same body of knowledge to the governments, where they have and they are prepared, and they are eventually, after going through the program, they are accredited like practitioners, like they know the body of knowledge, and they know what we are discussing when we talk about PPPs in my case, or project finance. What else? We also focus in measurement and the conformity of the the asset. Okay, I mentioned before ESD in Ebrd, but effectively there is a whole program where the government can really, and the private sector can really quantify the quality of the asset being financed by Ebrd. Okay, and there is a whole process and program to report that, to properly monitor and properly report that. So again, the standardization, accreditation, measurement, conformity. And then a little bit more specific in terms of project preparation, we have framework of consultants. So when we go deep into specific infrastructure programs, what we do is we shortlist a group of consultants with the required expertise, with the required experience, and then we can mobilize them quickly, which obviously that results in a lower cost to the government, but still competitively, right? It's important that the cost of the project is still being subject to competition, and that's why we do like to have framework of consultants for a specific topics. It can be water, or it can be PPP project preparation, or it can be even a specific country related. For example, in the case of Greece, we have a specific facility which is funded with 20 million euro, and 5 consortium of consultants with the required experience, with required language skills and knowledge of the local legal framework in order to work on PPP project preparation in the case of Greece. We are already start thinking on how are we going to help Ukraine in the reconstruction, and again we are thinking in setting aside and preparing a framework of advisors and consultants that it can be mobilized quickly for working in specific sectors in specific conditions once the war is over and once the conditions allow us to start helping Ukraine and implementation of reconstruction works. Yeah, I think that's what the bank is doing in terms of lowering the cost of quality infrastructure and trying to help our country's operation.
Great, Marcos. So you are actually helping clients understand that there is value for money in going for quality infrastructure projects. And you're also working in the lines of standardization, accreditation, measurement, and conformity, which are pre-requirements to help clients invest in these lines. And you're also working very closely with consultants that can be mobilized on a short notice to help clients address quality infrastructure needs. You mentioned Greece and Ukraine, but I guess you can provide that type of expertise to all of your countries of operation. So thank you very much for this. So I would suggest that we now look into the Q&A, and I would like to welcome Cristina Gines. She is the Vice Chair of the FIDIC-IFI Committee and Business Development Director for Europe in CENER. And she will help me address the questions that have been posted in the chat. And she will be asking you a selection of those questions for you to answer. Cristina.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Ines, and thank you, everybody. There was an excellent panel, and so many interesting things have been said. There's quite a few questions in the chat, but I have chosen a first one, maybe for Sergio. I mean, feel free, the other panelists, to jump in to build on the answers from your colleagues. I think it will be very, very good. So it seems that the climate-related events are causing tremendous damage to infrastructure and require substantial funds to reinstate functionality. Is there a drive to undertake climate risks assessment on existing infrastructure? That would be the first.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I read it. So definitely, basically, we try to associate our contribution to refurbishment or new assets. So basically, if there is a potential activity construction activity to be carried out, for sure. An assessment on the system facility and its resilience to the future climate change can be undertaken at the same time. We don't have any specific facility for assessing, let's say, existing infrastructure assets that don't need to be refurbished or don't need to be rebuilt. But I take it, I will discuss with my team because I read it and some lights started to light up here. Before I finish, there is another element that I read in the panel, that's for FIDIC. So I would be very happy to share with FIDIC the EIB standards, a library of technical papers and documents that we have issued. I think that the idea that somebody published of having a library of international standards for the different international financial institutions is a very good idea, and I will be happy to put the EIB seat sharing all the technical documents with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. That's very good, and I think that we have already taken something very positive from this webinar with this statement. So I have a question for Nita. I don't know if Nita is still there. I think so.
Yeah,
or maybe...
I'm here.
Okay, so there is a question for you. From our colleague Manish. Thank you for highlighting the need to change the way engineers traditionally think. Do you think, do you or other panelists have any advice for the young engineers who are joining our workforce? FIDIC has a very robust program for emerging leaders, and they are demanding that we address this challenge now.
Yes, this is thank you, Manish, for asking that. This is, as I said, a very interesting and topical issue for us. We have embarked on a guideline which we're working on how to bring more youth and women. Let me not forget women into our industry, because it is really not inclusive. It is horrendously one-sided when it comes. We call it 3 C's. Clients, contractor, consultants are all that one generation men. So youth, we are actively working and discussing with our clients. By and large, we lend. Our water sector portfolio is about $20 billion currently. And again, it is with the clients' incentivization that we move, and we have managed to bring to a certain point of discussion by saying lower experience. You don't need 20 years. If you go in the past, it's always 20 years experience, 30 years experience in that niche market. Mechanical engineers must have designed this type of wastewater treatment systems with 30 years of experience. Who do you get? 80-year-old retired chief engineer from some part of the world. So we are really pushing local resources, local capacity, and that realization that the young generation can perform. It's all about performance, and seeing more and more of the younger generation, women engineers performing equally, if not better, will open up more opportunities, we feel. And we are quite set at bringing these home to our clients to say, try this. Try 10 young engineers who will shape up and bring innovations into your process, into your systems and cost, and reduce your cost. And something that I also wanted to add, when you look at cost benefit analysis, we never put those inputs of having inclusion. What does it cost to have a more inclusive set of consultants and more inclusive set of contractors? And at some point, we're looking for those evidence that it does indeed bring more sustainability. It does indeed reduce costs, because when we actually look at the O&M cost reduction, when you've got really good technology that lends itself to emerging trends, then what would be that cost benefit analysis? It will look very different. Similarly, lost damages in future, we haven't started computing these. So yeah, I think once we start reducing some of these baggages that we have of asking for 20 years experience, because again, if past is not defining our design standards, then why past experience must define our expertise, right? So we need to open these up, and we have to work with our government clients and private sector clients with that, and we're working on that. Thank you.
Great, Nida. Thank you. I don't know if somebody wants to add on that, but also related to what Nida and about opening up, there is a question about the involvement of people in general. So a question to all of you or whoever wants to jump in first. Do the banks will consider public participation through a more sensible design requirement of project preparation?
Maybe I can start. We are already doing that. Again,
Nida,
it is.
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, sorry. I also see Anthony's put his hand up. Sorry, I should have let you go first. But yeah, this whole idea, I think I discussed that we no longer do any projects without what we call strategic project planning. And that strategic planning piece is not just to look at procurement capacity, it is to look at public participation, the need, the local design needs, which are also defined by what the users perceive, and if the users are involved in the design, if the local materials can withstand that design. So that certainly is public, as in citizens who are recipient of the services, providers, local providers who are providing these local resources. And so the whole procurement and shaping of that project gets changed by feeding those inputs into that equation. We are no longer setting standards. We are letting the SPP process set standards, but it will take time, but we're getting onto it. There you go. I pass over to Anthony and others.
I'd just like to take you on the diversity issue. I think the idea that age and wisdom collaborates with youth and enthusiasm and technological capability is the way forward. I do think there's a tremendous benefit to be gained through that. But I'd also suggest that we've been doing in FIDIC a huge amount of work around diversity and inclusion. And I do think it is high time that there's a much more strategic approach taken to diversity and inclusion in international projects. And there are lots of opportunities in my mind to make that happen. And I agree 100% with you that diversity and inclusion brings with it tremendous benefits, not only for if I can call it the optics of it itself, but it brings very substantial change in the way issues are thought about and discussed and resolved. And I absolutely applaud the idea. I would challenge the MDBs to put your money where your mouth is, and let's start looking at some serious global awards in our space, because I think it is massively challenging to shift a profession which in most countries has 20 to 25% female participation. To really shift that statistic is going to take a tremendous investment. And we're a long way away at the moment from being able to create the momentum and the change we need.
Good point, Anthony. Thank you. So there is another question for you, Nita, before you go. So, and for the others as well, of course. So you make excellent points in the need of rethinking the way we approach engineering solutions. But we are highly regulated industry with codes and compliance requirements, given what we do is a life safety matter. We all know that. Does MDVs allow for exceptions to code requirements? And he gives you an example. Will the consultants be allowed to use new materials and design techniques as they take on, for example, reconstruction of Pakistan flood-ravaged infrastructure?
Yes, thank you. I saw that question. And again, it will be very naive of me to say codes don't matter and let's not have it. It's not possible. This is public money. We have public accountability associated with that money. Again, I think a lot of us here are engineers and project managers, and we do need to start with some codes. But if we look at our procurement policy, and it is harmonized with other MDBs, we always talk about principles, not rules. There is a big difference. So provided principles are upheld, rules give way. They always have. And also if you look at our procurement policy, we are more and more using local expertise, local materials that are more sustainable, looking at life cycle of where they come from, what's the carbon footprint of these. And if they're more appropriate, definitely the MDBs, I can't speak for everybody, but we promote these heavily to say, use local material, put them into your cost benefit analysis. And we even have, we're thinking of we already trying to implement incentives where contractors proposing these sort of uses of more sustainable material get better marks or get picked. Same with consultants. But, Anthony, yes, we take your challenge on. It does take time, but it's never optics. Optics days of having women and youth and thinking them as optics are gone. It is all it, but it needs, there is an evidence. We just need to quantify that, because there's a bank. Our clients will respond to us when we can show this is the evidence, this much is what you'll save. And we're working on that. So yeah, I hope I've answered this briefly on the idea of using not quotes, can't throw quotes, but keeping flexibility and principles there. So quotes, when needed, can be rethought to uphold the principles and not just be dogmatic about the rules and the quote itself. Thank you very much. I also have to go. I have to thank all of you. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you all again.
Thank you, Nita. It was great to having you here. Thank you. So there's a few questions. I don't know how much time we have left. Ines, can we have a couple of questions still?
Yes, I would say a couple of questions. Then we will wrap up with a few comments and have a final poll question.
Okay, so just let me put, so just let me put on the table for all of them, for Marcos, Sergio, Henry as well. So there is a few comments about the quality-based proposal. So I will rephrase this. So I think, given the importance of project preparation, I should ask the MDVs if they are thinking, so to speak, out of the box in terms of procurement strategy for the projects. So trying to make it in a different way, the balance between economic and technical, and to support this quality infrastructure that is, as we have said today many times, based on this project preparation.
Okay, I'll go first. So, I mean, if the question is refers to how Ebrd or how MDBs select consultants to undertake projects, we do have two policies. One that applies to the cases where Ebrd directly contracts consultants. And that's very similar to any corporate procurement policy with some freedom in terms of direct selection and then obligations to publicly tender and publicly and competitively score proposals based on price and also based on quality and experience. However, I would say this in infrastructure, in most cases, when we land on sovereign basis, it's the government who actually procures the work of advisors and the work of construction, right? So in that case, we do have a procurement policy that we want the beneficiary of the sovereign loan to follow. Okay, we don't impose our policy. We just it's a policy based on principles, and we require that the government or the public grantor of the future contract follows that principles, which are very basic in terms of competition, in case of transparency, in terms of disclosure. But we check those principles are met, but we do not really participate in the evaluation. We don't really have a veto of anyhow. So we just confirm that the principles are met when we lend into a project that is implemented with Ebrd money. But again, in other cases, when it's us mobilizing consultants, we do apply our own corporate procurement, which is obviously more, I would say, streamlined and based on corporate principles. I'm not sure that answered the question, but I hope it does.
Yes, I don't know if anybody wants to add.
Yes, please, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. I raised the hand, but it's okay. So I fully agree with Marcos. More or less, we do the same. But I wanted to give some real numbers, no, to know. So we want to find the best experts, the good ones, the people who really know how to manage these projects and these assets. So in general, in the EIB procurement processes, the tenders we do for consultancy works, 80% of the scoring is given to the capacity, to the experience, to the strategy they want to put in place, and between 15 and 20% is on the price. So that gives you an idea. Of course, we need to take into account the price, but it's never the main driver. Actually, a very good consultant typically gets the assignment, and the price is marginal. 5, 10%, 15% of the price will not change the game, but not having a good one, the best professionals in this particular field of asset definitely will change the landscape. So that's why the price is never the key parameter.
Great, thank you, Sergio. I think that, Ines, we could wrap up already because we are just 4 minutes away from the end of the webinar.
Okay, I will make some wrap-up comments on the very interesting conversation we just had. And I want to thank our speakers again. They have been fabulous at shedding light to this topic, which is very important for our industry looking forward. And then I will issue a final question for the audience, so bear with me. So some of the key messages I've taken from today's session is that we have actually to reshift project preparation to adapt it to the new context in order to identify and quantify risks appropriately. And we should do this by making our teams more technological, more diverse, and younger as well. So quality principles have to be there, it's important, but we need to be flexible in the way we apply the rules to achieve the sustainability objectives. The quality infrastructure principles are not a standard per se. There are a number of standardization initiatives going on at the same time, and we need to make a further effort to streamline them. Preparing quality infrastructure can be a bit more expensive in the early stages, but it proves to be cost effective in the long term. Sustainability data is what is going to make the business case for investing in quality infrastructure. And the sustainability data also has to be made available from the early stages to make projects comparable and credible to the private sector. ESG criteria is definitely attractive to the private sector. It's not a nice to have, but it's really becoming a must have for infrastructure projects. And there is definitely a need for closer collaboration between governments, development banks, companies, and civil society organizations to deliver quality infrastructure effectively so that we can get closer to achieving the SDGs. And we hope this webinar is actually a step in this direction. So thank you very much to all of the panelists. And just before I give the floor to the final words by Anthony Barry, let me post the final question. Do you believe global standards for quality infrastructure are necessary, or if they should be adapted to each region? So yes would be global and no would be regional. Let's give it 20 seconds and then we can give the floor for the final words of Anthony Barry. Okay, so I'm seeing that there is actually a big part of the audience who's believing that it should be regionalized, which is a very interesting takeaway, especially when we're talking in a forum with regional banks. So I take this on board, and I will hand over the floor to Anthony Berry for the final words. Thank you once again for joining.
Thank you, Ines, and thank you for your moderation. Very much appreciated. I personally found the whole webinar very interesting. It throws out a lot of challenges, but just shows you what a great opportunity we have to contribute even further to the global good as engineers and in our obviously various day jobs and roles we have. Thank you to Marcos, Sergio, Henry, and Nita. Presentations and the discussion I found really fantastic, and there's a lot to follow up, if I can put it that way, and a lot of work to do. Whilst we might not all agree on standards and their application globally, regionally, or otherwise, I think what we do agree on is collaboration and a lot of knowledge sharing, and I think that has come through. There's absolutely no doubt upskilling is required right across the professions, not just our own, but quite a number, to make us, or put us in a position of being able to take on this new world with confidence. So look, I thank you all very, very much. I'd just like to give a little plug, if I could. We continue this webinar series with a few more in the coming weeks. So you can see there we have one internal one about our membership, but we have another one on the 17th of November, combating and addressing corruption in our sector. So please feel free to register for those. We'd love to have you on board. And our major contract users conference, the international one, is being held in London on 29th and 30th of November. And again, welcome you to register for that event. So look, thank you very much for everybody's contribution tonight, participants, speakers, and moderators, organisers, and thank you to Benoit Clocheret from EFCA in making this collaboration possible. So thank you very much. Have a great evening, afternoon, or morning, whichever is the case in your part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.